Good afternoon. My name is John Holgerson. I have 3 poems to read this afternoon. The first is from my book, Convictions of the Heart. Before I read it, I just want to commend Jennifer Harris and all of her colleagues with the Hometown Poet Laureates for putting this on once again. Last year's festival, for those of you who attended it in some form, was wonderful. I am anticipating that this year will be even better. The first poem I want to read is Tanka Triptych. A tanka is a form of classical Japanese poetry. Each tanka is made up of 31 syllables spread out over 5 lines, 5-7, 5-7, and 7. I put 3 of them together to build a triptych simply because I'd written them at different times in my life, and I put them together because they share a similar theme. The absence of you. A shawl across my shoulders, drawn tighter by the stillness of trees, the silence of birds. Watching the moon float amid cruising charcoal clouds, an ashen buoy on an onyx ocean, I thought of you tonight. The old dog lies down, headstone shade blankets him. He waits as before, head on the ground, dreaming, in smell of earth, scent of home. The second poem I wrote a couple of months ago. I had read a poem called If There Were No Paintings by Leonard Cohen. He wrote the poem and read it at his first showing of his paintings at an art gallery somewhere in Canada, I forget exactly where. So having read If There Were No Paintings, I thought I would write a poem about if there were no poems. And as Paul said at the beginning this afternoon, about the audience appears to be mostly poets, well, the poem is addressed to poets. If There Were No Poems, after If There Were No Paintings by Leonard Cohen. If there were no poems in the world, maybe then would mine be important. Since this isn't the case, let us not hurry to write just any line. Let us first prove ourselves worthy of the title poet. We have the time to find beauty in every scene and record it so it never erodes or fades away. Look around you. Choose to see what you chose not to see before. It could be a dog walking with its owner on a familiar crow-lined road for the very last time, or a man watching the demolition of a building where he once both lived and worked, or a posthumous portrait of the self-imposed quirks of a red-headed mother. It may be a usual muse, like the pretty woman walking down the street who smiles without warning or expectation at the old man with kind eyes peeking out at her beneath the brim of his well-worn brown cap. The editor of a literary journal might call such works poems. I call them admissible evidence required to render a final verdict. This last poem I wrote a couple of months ago. There's a Greek island called Hydra, and I think the only thing you really need to know about that island for the purposes of this poem is that it has no cars. There are no motorized vehicles of any kind on the island. You can ride a bicycle, but you have to leave it outside the limits of the municipality. There's a main town where the main harbor is, and there's 5 other villages scattered around the circumference of the island. So you get around by foot or by donkey. And that's probably all you really need for the purpose. I will point out there are 2 ambulances for the local hospital. They added a second ambulance this past year. And there is a large red Toyota pickup truck with all the fire department apparatus in the bed. So other than those motorized vehicles, there aren't any. This is called the Old Men of Hydra. The old men of Hydra sit on a cool marble curb along the cobblestone street near the statue of the revolutionary Andrei Miaoulis, discussing the island's problems and how they would solve them if in charge. Some wear overalls stained with whitewash and putty from the lighter work they do now. The clothes of others smell of mullet and sea bass caught early in the day and then sold to impatient taverners. They all watch and laugh at the braying donkeys tethered along the harbor front a few yards away, waiting for the giddy riders sailing on the hourly ferries and hydrofoils from Poros, Spetsia, and Athens. The children will want 20-euro rides around the town, while their parents and the tourists will need the donkeys to carry their luggage to the homes and hotels, some high up the mountainside, towering above the town and its horseshoe harbor. The old men remember their own long-dead donkeys hauling the first refrigerators and washing machines up the uneven stone staircases and twisting concrete streets to the storied captain's mansions, once dying from time's decay and man's crumbling neglect. These wizened, weather-beaten elders restored them with their hard, calloused, nimble fingers and bleeding palms that left scars running along and through their crooked, leathered lifelines. They recall how they put up the first telephone poles in the 1960s, connected the wires that small brown sparrows would sit on, and how one Canadian poet wrote a song about it. They live in small, whitewashed houses with roofs of reddish-orange tile and large blue, red, or purple shutters far behind the town and its bustling port. They are venerated by their children and grandchildren, for whom they built and rebuilt the island decade after decade with strength, sweat, and suffering. They are the unofficial mayors of their neighborhoods, where they know everyone and govern with a father's frail firmness and a grandfather's abiding generosity. Thank you.